Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155 from UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championship, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championship, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel Delia, wishing that your day is going well. Wherever you are, whoever you are, hopefully your day is going awesome. And so, how's my day been? Well, I am getting prepped up and ready to go watch the first MMA event to happen in the year of 2021 in a major organization. I won't be surprised if there's like some small time like MMA organization that's like doing some shows. But right now, this upcoming Saturday, we're going to see Calvin Kattar versus Max Holloway in the main event. And that main event is going to be a real close one here. People are already throwing out Calvin Kattar, man. Really, he has a chance against Max Holloway? No. So my argument for this fight is that I believe Max Holloway should win this fight. But I believe Calvin Kattar will be the one finishing strong here, in the sense that Calvin Kattar, his biggest weakness is a tendency of going very slow early in the rounds here. Typically when I see Calvin Kattar fight, it's kind of a throwaway thing where he's going to go lose the first round. That's how I see it. It's always Calvin Kattar, he does all right in the first round, and then in the second half of the second round, he starts doing well for himself, and then in the third round, he just unleashes everything. And this will be a 5-round fight here, and I've seen Calvin Kattar participate in these long hauls, and the way how I see it is that Max Holloway very likely will defeat Calvin Kattar rounds 1 through 3, and then the 4th and 5th round will go towards Calvin Kattar. But you can also spin it, and then you can say that if Calvin Kattar were to go and start doing really well for himself in the second half of the second round, to which how he normally does it, then Calvin Kattar could win 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And that's a lot asking, right? It's hard to imagine Max Holloway losing 4 out of 5 rounds. But I believe Calvin Kattar, he's grown as a fighter tremendously ever since his loss to Zabit. And the way how things are going right now for Calvin Kattar, if he can defeat Max Holloway, there's a real possibility we could see Zabit versus Calvin Kattar again as a rematch. And winner of that fight is going to go fight Volkanovski. So this fight coming up on Saturday has a lot of implications going on. A lot of featherweight implications, and it'll be interesting to see what the result will be in this year. I believe Max Holloway is the slight favorite to win this, but don't be surprised if Calvin Kattar can make the adjustments and he can go and be very aggro and aggressive in the second round and third round. Max Holloway, if you look at his past 2 fights, he has a tendency of, this is not just Max Holloway, but a lot of fighters generally, as it pertains to these like long 5-round fights, those types of fighters slow down by the latter half of those championship rounds. And even though they can, like Max Holloway, he can still throw like a large volume of strikes, but for the most part, he does have a tendency of slowing down significantly, and at some point becomes way too passive at times during these championship rounds. So Holloway should win this, but don't be surprised if Kattar wins this, if he is able to adjust and adapt his actions accordingly early in the fights. So that's like my prediction for Holloway versus Calvin Kattar. And so I'm excited for that. Though, I will give you an update on this, though. I still attend church. Alright then, me, being a good Christian boy, I still attend church. Our pastor did not want to go and do... he wants to do live services. He wants to like broadcast the church sermon on Sundays. But I do that. I record it, I broadcast it, and so he wants me to come along. And one day when I did come along, I was with somebody who was COVID positive. So I'm stuck quarantining right now for 10 to 14 days. It's been, at this point, as I am talking right now, it's been... I got it last Sunday. It'll be 9 days. Yeah, I'm about 9 days in right now. So I got 5 more days left of quarantining to get through. It is really tough. It really is. It sucks not being able to work. I'm gonna come by for next Sunday. Then that's gonna cover the whole 14 days for work, for broadcasting for the church. But yeah, man, it sucks quarantining. Days simultaneously both feel long and incredibly slow. I feel nappy. I feel tired. But at the same time, I want to go outside. Like, I really want to go out to a gym or start hiking. In Los Angeles, gyms aren't open, which is upsetting because I'm now out here eating a whole lot of protein and meat, but I'm not working it off. Like, I got a whole lot of chicken, a whole lot of like pasta and fish, a lot of pork and like steak. I'm eating all these like meats and protein stuff, but I'm not really doing much with them other than like using my home as like my own like workout gym, and it ain't doing well. It ain't. It's not the same time. Like, I need that motivation, man. I prefer going out, walking on top of mountains or hiking top of mountains, or if I'm not doing that, then going to the gym. And I use my home gym sparingly, but it's annoying to go with this quarantining, me staying at home, working out, and like getting a little, not really getting that much of a pump. All right, then it gets. I miss the gym. I miss the gym, and I miss the fresh air. So that's happening. Also, note, thank you Windows for finally updating your thing so I can finally edit properly videos on my laptop. Yikes. It took them like 5 months to actually start editing with using Adobe Premiere on my laptop. It's just, man, it gets frustrating. But the good thing about this though, this is it's a auditory medium. So I don't have to edit videos for this. Thank goodness. I can still broadcast for some reason, but I have to go buy another computer, which I have done. I gotta go buy another computer because this Windows glitch issue only pertains to laptops with computers. Whatever. It's complicated. And so, thank you, Windows, for finally updating your system to get that done. And now, with that getting out of the way, let's get on to the news brief. This entire episode will be an entire news brief going through what's going on in the wacky, strange world of mixed martial arts. Once again, as a reminder, that's a weird image. So, I'm seeing the first image that pops up when you type in MMA, you see Conor McGregor behind Floyd Mayweather, and he's doing like the Y2J arms extended pose behind him. Looks kind of weird. But alright then, MMA. First MMA news involves the WBC president insisting Conor McGregor is just one victory away from boxing title shots. Alright, let's go with that. Boxing is its own little thing that bothers the heck out of me and bothers a whole lot of people. And to the point now that, okay, I'm going to be honest here. Do any fight fans care about championship belts? Like, do they care? Like, if someone's, I know, even my dad and my uncles, my granddads, they're always like, the only title belt they kind of care about will be the WBC heavyweight belt. That's their only belt they care about. But they don't know what WBC stands for. All they know is that, like, you know, the past great heavyweight champions all held WBC heavyweight title belts. But they don't care about any of the other belts. They just don't. And I might as well talk about this right now, since I'm going to be talking about Conor McGregor, or it's entailed here that Conor McGregor is going to fight for a boxing title belt, which is absolutely insane. It's as insane as Jake Paul and Logan Paul saying, I'm going to go and be a professional boxer. It just, it gets frustrating, whatever. But one thing with boxing that I just got to talk about right now, alright then, for the most part, no one cares about belts. No one cares about them. Alright then. All we care about these fighters is whether or not... Here's the thing. Who's the one fighter... I forgot. Is it Triple G? It's not Triple G. But some other fighter... Okay, whatever. But the only way these boxers or these fighters can get popular or become big, really, is if they get promotion. Yeah. Like, if they get promotion, or they get commercials, or they do something that appeals, because the thing with boxing, it does not appeal to a young audience. It doesn't. There's a reason why Logan Paul and Jake Paul, why they can get so many people to get hooked on them, and it's because they specifically target people ages 16 through 32. But I love boxing because I grew up doing boxing and watching boxing. I'm Filipino. The face of our entire country is Manny Pacquiao. Okay, then so I love boxing and I've been watching boxing. So that's me though. But for the most part, if I ask any of my friends, like, hey, can you name any boxers? Even for them, they'll struggle thinking about Manny Pacquiao. They're gonna say Floyd Mayweather, but they'll not tell you who Floyd Mayweather have beaten. Like, go to a random person, tell them to name one boxer who is currently and actively fighting, and they're gonna say Floyd Mayweather, and then ask them who has Floyd Mayweather beaten, and they're either going to give you a blank stare, or they're going to say, maybe, Conor McGregor. And even then they're going to say, like, who has Conor McGregor defeated in the UFC, and they're probably not going to know. Because for the most part here, no one cares about boxing titles. And so it is ridiculous, even for the WBC, which appeals to, it appeals to a much older generation, and when, 20 years down the line, or even 10 years down the line, when someone says, hey, he's the WBC champion. Like, no one cares. No one really does care. And so this article coming in from MMA Media, headline, WBC president insists Conor McGregor is just one victory away from boxing title shots, written in by Jesse Holland. The article starts off with former UFC 2 division champion is just 0-1 as a professional boxer, having been shut down by pound-for-pound great Floyd Mayweather. But apparently he's one victory away to get a title shot, according to WBC president Mauricio Sulaiman, which shouldn't come as much of a surprise to fans who are intimately familiar with prize fighting. Boxing has always maintained a sword-in-the-stone approach to matchmaking. He goes on to say, I would say he needs to face and defeat a ranked fighter. Then he would be eligible to be ranked and compete for a title. We have plenty of examples of this, of Muay Thai fighters who turn to professional boxers, and they are eligible to fight for the title. This is not a rookie entering the sport. He has a long history of combat sports. So it's a different scenario of what it's used to in the past. Alright. Technically, he's not wrong. Technically. But he's not one boxing fight away from a title shot. He ain't. No one cares about rankings except for, the general audience or the general casual person who watches this, even people who are trying to get into boxing. I know some of my friends who are diehard into boxing, especially just looking for Mexican fighters, and even then they're confused about rankings. All they know is every person who is a champion has 20 bouts. When I did boxing training, the trainer who I was with had a bunch of boxing belts with him because he fought back in the Philippines. And I'm and he told me, he's yeah, man, those belts, they just give it away to any fighter who's kind of good. And that's the weird reality. I guess that's one reason why I can't get into boxing. Or whenever I do watch boxing, it has to be Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao or some weird show like Conor or Mike Tyson fighting Roy Jones. The only reason why I watched Logan Paul versus that one other YouTuber, KSI guy, was because my brother kept bugging me about it. He's like, Gorby, let's watch it. And then we saw this fight, and I think I still remember. So it was KSI versus Logan Paul, but it was the same night. It was Calvin Kattar, who was fighting Saturday, against the Beats. And my deal was okay, I'm going to watch this bad fight, and so I'll appreciate the good fight later on. And so I saw Logan Paul and KSI, and I'm I know this isn't legitimate boxing, but even then, legitimate boxing is kind of shady in the sense that it's very inconsistent. All right, then, and also it's a sport of boxing. You can argue now that Logan Paul did better in terms of getting people to watch the product of boxing than a whole lot of boxers. 100% guarantee that. But I'm watching this awful fight between Logan Paul and KSI, in which they have bad form and they lunge in every third strike, and it looks very ugly, and they gas out within 2 minutes into their fights. It looks very bad and sloppy. At some point by the end of the fight, they're just fighting each other as if they're two homeless people on schizophrenia, throwing out their arms wildly. It's very ugly. But after that fight was finished, I then tuned over and saw Zabit versus Calvin Kattar, and it looks so much better. Like the striking accuracy, the proficiency, the form, even the angling of shots looks so much better, and they hit way harder. And KSI and Logan Paul are like kind of bigger dudes than Zabit and Calvin Kattar. So I have a much more appreciation of MMA because it's a lot more easier to follow. The belts are easier to follow. The rankings at times, sometimes, are easier to follow. And there's just too many belts in boxing for me to keep tracking. And so you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Come back after a short break here. See you soon.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. And so, I just read an article from MMA Mania. This is Conor McGregor's one victory away from getting a boxing title shot. Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. Yeah. Why not, right? Why not have Conor McGregor get a title fight? It doesn't even have to be for the WBC title. You can say Conor McGregor fights for a boxing world title because there's so many world titles. I think I read up somewhere. I think I found out that there were over 100 belts in organized boxing. And so here's a weird thing. So in boxing, there's a whole lot of cross-promotion stuff. A whole lot of it. So that's why you're going to go see one champion who is like from another, like a different branding, like WBA or something like that, fight for the WBC title. And then there's other titles, and then there's like 2-pound differences between weight classes that really it shouldn't. Oh man, it gets frustrating. There's too many belts. At least for like MMA shows, they're kind of isolated in a sense. Like if you're watching UFC, you're only going to see UFC championship representation. If you watch Bellator, only see Bellator championship representation. Even in one championships, where they bring in current champions from other organizations, you don't see that fighter carry their actual belt. You just said that, oh man, this guy's like a champion in Muay Thai in some other company. That's all about it, though. It's not like in the boxing where you have this one boxer who's not even holding a belt with his entourage, each of them holding a belt, and it looks weird just looking at it because it looks like, alright then, he's like, here's a boxer who's a champion, not holding a championship belt, but he's got these 6 other guys holding championship belts that are not champions. It's confusing, it's annoying, whatever. Okay, so the next piece here, also coming from MMA Mania, former UFC fighter Spencer Fisher left permanently disabled and unable to work in a heartbreaking update. So this is coming in from also Jesse Holland. So the article goes on to say, I'm sure the check signers over at the UFC felt pretty good about themselves last week after pledging $1 million to a Cleveland clinic to help with research into the effects of head trauma on professional athletes, including MMA fighters. They might want to put that cork back in the bubbly. That's because the future is now and longtime UFC veteran Spencer Fisher, who helped launch the promotion into the stratosphere with fan-friendly and brain-friendly Fight of the Night Wars against Sam Stout, among others, was recently declared permanently disabled and unable to work. That's according to an in-depth interview coming in from MMA Fighting. He goes on to say, I forget where I'm going, depression, dizzy spells, calling people different names, not knowing their actual names. My kids, I've had instances where I couldn't think of their names on the spot. My balance of shots, I have a hard time remembering what I did yesterday. Last week is a complete blur. Spencer Fisher, who is 44 years old, finished his career with 24-9, 19 finishes, suffering just 3 knockout losses in defeats. But as we learned from TJ Grant and many others, brain injuries can be unpredictable with devastating consequences. And the King, which is his nickname, is now dependent on medications like memantine and cariprazine to get him through the day. He says, I gotta support a family who understands my condition and tries to help me out the best they can. I don't want to die alone and not know anybody when I see them. I don't want to go out to this world not knowing people I love, or not knowing new people. Fisher will receive compensation from UFC through an arrangement with promotion president Dana White, alongside other veterans like Matt Hughes and Chuck Liddell. But the funds dried up when Zuffa was bought by Endeavor back in summer 2016. Spencer was first diagnosed with bilateral destructive lesions on his brain while still under contract with UFC in mid-2013 and was declared medically unit to compete. The King would never fight again. Yikes, that's upsetting here. Note though, okay, I might go off on a tangent here, but letting you know that. So here's the thing. I studied in a University of California system, a UC system. And in the system, or in all the schools in that system, they're constantly being given, like, donations and pledges from rich organizations and companies. Alright then, so, when you go to the rabbit hole of, like, understanding why these companies are doing these, a part of it does stem from them trying to, like, evade taxes and stuff, because you'd be surprised, being able to donate money actually works as a way for you to avoid taxes as write-offs. So in the grand scheme of things, you're actually saving money. Not only are you saving money, it also works well for PR. And I read up somewhere that that University of Irvine, there was somebody who pledged nearly over $100 million into the computer engineering program. And my friend, who is a computer engineer, she's like, oh, cool, more money is being given to our program. But then me and her looked at each other, and I was part also of an engineering club back in the university system here. And also I've interacted and I've worked for the University of Irvine's engineering clubs, and they said, yeah, I don't get why we need more money. We really don't need it. Because there's a lot of money being invested into the University of Irvine's engineering program, and so any more money that's being added in doesn't really do much. I'm being perfectly honest. The money is set set in a bank that's just it's not allocated to anywhere, and it's just there as a reserve, but it's not being used at all, and it's expected it's not ever going to be used because University of Irvine's engineering program does not need the money. They just don't. So here's the thing. So the money that's been donated, the person who donated the money was able to save some money through write-offs, and also they're in a good PR. So they're in a good relationship with University of Irvine, and also it's an engineering company that's doing this also. So they are now linked to the school here that's gonna go act as a feeder system for them to get more engineers. So upon saving money and upon donations, they're saving money. And they're getting new employees. Good on them for that. And they're getting new, fresh employees coming off college, so they can go and kind of underpay them, mostly. So, yeah, that's happening there. So when I see the UFC donating $1 million to the Cleveland Clinic, I'm like, really? Okay. Alright, so $1 million to a lot of people is a lot, but for billion-dollar organizations, it's very little. As a person who studied and worked in the Silicon Valley, where $1 million is just whatever money. I know it's weird. Okay, if you are a person who lives somewhere in the South or in the Midwest, or even for somebody who lives internationally, I want you to try to bring whatever money you can over to Northern California, the Silicon Valley, and just see how long you can survive. Alright then, the concept of what you think is big time money is actually small time money. In the Silicon Valley here, where the Silicon Valley is comprised of a whole lot of billion-dollar organizations and $1 million to this clinic. You know what? Good on you for that. $1 million. But you could have donated more. And you know what? All because you're pledging $1 million, we're still unsure whether that $1 million was even used appropriately and actually has done anything positive. So, yeah. I know. That's my personal rant on it. It's like, I donated $1,000 to this, like, hospital. Okay. But what did that $1,000 actually do for the hospital, though? Because you can give a person money, but if they don't do anything with that money, that is like positive. Because for all I know, you donated $1,000, and that $1,000 donations was used for like $1,000 worth of donuts across the entire year. That's a real possibility, and it can definitely be a real thing. And so this is coming in from MMAJunkie.usatoday.com, and I've told you about this, that I am trying to get into One Championships, and the headline being today being Rug returns, faces fellow powerhouse Alen Ilani at One Championship 127, Unbreakable 2. So, viral sensation Omar Khan, better known as Rug, makes his One Championship debut later this month. Promotion officials officially announced that the massive Senegalese wrestler will face Cameroon heavyweight Alen Ilani, who is 4-5, at One Championship 127, Unbreakable 2. Which streams on BR Live via tape delay on January 29 from Singapore Indoor Stadium. Kane made his pro debut in December of 2019 for Aries FC as a complete unknown on the global scene, but made an immediate impact with a sheer power and wrestling acumen. And yeah, the dude's he's a proper powerhouse here, as he was expected to return to action for Aries FC 2, but the ongoing global pandemic has crashed the event. Meanwhile, though, the 45-year-old Nglani is a lifelong martial artist with multiple black belts in traditional striking. While he had mixed results in MMA, he's certainly capable of spectacular debuting as a pro, with a 31-second knockout win and later earning a victory in just 11 seconds. However, he struggled in his consistency the past recent fights. The night's main event also takes place in the heavyweight division with Italy's Mauro Cirilli against Russia's Abulabasar versus Vagabov. So that bout's going to come up late January. Also, there'll be another One Championship event coming up, I think, 10 days from now, which will be on January 22. So that is expected to go happen for One Championships. So I'm looking at the first Unbreakable events. So it'll be taking place January 22nd on a Friday, 8:30 p.m. You can watch. Here's the thing. The cool thing about One Championship, though, is you can watch all the events at its fullest. You don't have to go and pay for it. You don't have to pay for it. My monthly and yearly payments are stacking up. It's getting kind of hard paying for things on a monthly basis right now with HBO, with Netflix and Hulu and stuff. So it kind of helps that Bleacher Report does provide the full event the day after the One Championship event occurs. That's how I'm keeping up with One Championship. With Collision Course, with Big Bang, with Unbreakable 1 and 2. So Unbreakable is gonna happen January 22nd, and then you can watch Unbreakable the day right afterwards on January 23 on a Saturday. And they're typically 2.5 to 3 hour shows. And well, okay, I'm gonna say about this right now. One Championships does this thing where they show you what the main card is, but they don't show you the other fights coming in throughout the show. It's so weird, because the last One Championship event I watched, they showed this card, like, here's a preview of what to expect from this card here, and they showed like 5 fights or 6 fights, and then they're promoting the heck out of the last fights, because like that's the main event. And it turns out after that fight was over, they then went on to have 2 more fights, which were like a rank fight and a championship bout. So it's such a weird thing they do in the presentation of the show, where it kind of tricked me. Maybe it was purposely done, where they tricked the viewer into thinking what the actual main event is and a fake main event in order to hook you in, to make you feel like, oh man, I'm here at the main event, alright then. Oh, no. That's not the real main event. This is the real main event. Also, there's a big fight coming up in the real co-main event here. So I'm watching these One Championship shows, and I'm like, wait a minute. So that one fight they're promoting the heck out of throughout this entire show for being super big, really important, that you focused on, that's not actually the main event. You made it seem like it was the main event. You promoted it as if it was the main event. It was the top fight on the card that was being shown in the graphics card early in the show, and that's not the actual main event. It just, One Championships, it's very weird how they try to present their shows, where every single video package of one is like all about honor. Like, I swear, every single promo package is the same, where it's like, I'm a hard fighter and I fight for honor. And then, like, I swear, like, you could have a drinking contest of whoever can make it out of watching a one championship event every time they say the word honor and pride, because always honor and pride. And typically when there's like two fighters who are doing their promo about, you know, what they expect to do in this fight, they never ever talk about the other fighter. It's so weird. They're always saying, hey, my name is Joe Blow and here's what I've been doing and I'm training hard for this fight. Like, that's really about it. They never talk or do these promos as if they are studying their opponents. Because that's what happens for Bellator and for UFC and for PFL. Whenever we see a promo package, you always see one fighter talking smack or you're saying something about the other fighter. It always feels like they're just in a vacuum or in a bubble where these fighters, they're doing the promo packages, they're training, but the promo package would not change if the fighter they were fighting was some other different person. It's weird. The presentation for One Championships is something that I still have to adjust to. Once again, you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Coming back after a short break here as we continue on to the news brief of the podcast. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. And so this is coming in from SportBible.com. Yes. Manny Pacquiao goes on to say, I want an MMA fighter next. Sets up Conor McGregor showdown. Boxing is being written in by Alex Reed, by the way. Boxing legend Manny Pacquiao has said he wants to experience fighting an mixed martial artist in his next fight, opening the door to a lucrative showdown with Conor McGregor. Filipino megastar Manny Pacquiao, now 42 years old, is the 147-pound world champion after defeating previously undefeated Keith Thurman back in 2019. So a bout between these two world-famous fighters would generate huge amounts and interest. Now, Manny Pacquiao has given strongest indication yet that McGregor is his next fight in 2021. Asked about taking on American welterweights Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford, the Pac-Man told Filipino outlet Business Mirror, he goes on to say, and I quote, "They're my options, but right now I want to experience fighting an MMA mixed martial artist," referring to Conor McGregor. "I will also donate a big portion of my income to Filipino COVID-19 victims." On Spence, Pacquiao, now a senator in the Philippines, replied, "He is too slow. Spence is slower than Thurman, but it's going to be a good fight between us." I'll say this right now. Conor McGregor versus Manny Pacquiao. That's the big money fight. That's the big money fight for both fighters. I think Floyd Mayweather is going to fight one of the Paul brothers. One of them. Combat sports is very weird now. It no longer is a thing now like, oh man, what happened if these two boxers fight off? Or these two MMA fighters fight off? It's not going to be, what would happen if You know what? Conor McGregor fighting Manny Pacquiao and one of the Paul brothers fighting against Floyd Mayweather is the equivalent of like being drunk in a bar and someone saying, "Hey, bro, wouldn't it be cool if these two guys like fight off? Who would fight, ninja or samurai?" It's getting to like that territory now of like awkward and cringe, and this generally people who are fans of combat sports, you don't really want combat sports, you just want to see something out there for combat sports. And so, well, what the heck is this? So it is coming in from MMA Fighting. The Morning Reports, Daniel Cormier says UFC 257 will really elevate Michael Chandler if he wins. Calls out Conor McGregor. It is coming in from Jed Meshew. Next weekend at UFC 257, former 3-time Bellator lightweight champion Michael Chandler will finally make his debut against Dan Hooker. And I've always said this bout is going to be a very close one. I'm leaning closer in towards the direction of Dan Hooker winning this bout. But according to Daniel Cormier, is what he says it's the perfect fight. This from the DC and Helwani show. Dan Hooker is going to challenge and make Michael Chandler fight in every aspect of MMA. Hooker is as tough as they come. He's from a great team. He's got unbelievable fighting spirits, will, cardio. I mean, him and Dustin Poirier went to absolute war in the Apex facility building. And honestly, it was a close bout. You could have said Poirier, Hooker, you could toss a coin, and it would be either person winning. Like, if I was the judges, it'd be difficult to call on who won that fight. It really would, because they were so even and close to beating one another from both the eye test and also the fight stats, that it was a hard call for Dustin Poirier to go win the bout. But going back in, Dan Cormier goes on to say, if you want to see whether or not Michael Chandler is ready for the elite of the division, he has to fight and defeat Dan Hooker, which is not an easy thing to do. The last thing a Bellator champion made his way to the UFC, it was Eddie Alvarez, who made his debut against Don Cerrone. And Eddie Alvarez, he ended up having a really good run in the UFC. It was a short run, but still a really darn good run compared to most fighters. Cormier goes on to say, this is a challenging fight. I'm not exactly sure outside of Patricio Pitbull, who is fantastic. This will be the toughest fight he's ever had. When you look at who Dan Hooker has defeated, he's in his absolute prime, coming off a main event fight against Dustin Poirier, where it went tilt for over 25 minutes. This is easily one of the biggest fights Chandler has ever been involved in. He also gets the rub. He gets the fight in the same stage as Conor McGregor. Yeah, it's just weird knowing that Conor McGregor. Oh man. So if Chandler were to defeat Dan Hooker, I 100% am sure that Chandler will call out McGregor. I'm 100% sure on that. And depending on the Conor McGregor we'll see, are we going to see the Conor McGregor, the one who dominates their opponent, or the Conor McGregor who gets gassed out after the second round? Whatever we see, Michael Chandler, I believe Michael Chandler has higher odds of defeating Conor than he does defeating Dan Hooker. Yeah, I'm a firm believer of that. I really do. I also think it would be a great fight if we saw Dan Hooker versus Conor McGregor. The thing, though, with Conor McGregor, for as many possible fights I would like to see him participate in and compete in, like Conor McGregor versus Gaethje or Conor McGregor versus Tony Ferguson, those would be awesome bouts. As a fight fan, those are the fights you would want to see. But the odds of seeing them, considering Conor McGregor's strategy and how much his value is, it's very tough to see him fight against those fighters and him not to ask an incredibly high amount of pay from the UFC. He says it will really elevate Chandler if he gets the job done, but if he doesn't, we're back in the situation where you have those highly thought of free agents and it doesn't work out. No, I go against that. What Dan Cormier says, if Michael Chandler were to lose, he will then have to fight somebody who is probably like number 7, number 8, number 10 ranked from there. Let me look up the rankings right now for the lightweight division, because the lightweight division has to be one of the most stacked divisions out there. And also, we also have Charles Oliveira. Don't forget, Charles Oliveira is right there, and he's a fighter who I really do believe, I'm being perfectly honest, he's the type of fighter who can go out there and just steamroll the competition, and he would be able to defeat Gaethje. I believe he is capable of defeating Khabib Nurmagomedov. If there's any fighter currently in the UFC who I believe has the highest odds of potentially defeating Khabib, it would have to be Charles Oliveira. Currently looking at the lightweight rankings, Paul Felder versus Chandler would be great. Paul Felder versus RDA. Paul Felder versus Kevin Lee. if there are two fighters who I can name right now that Michael Chandler has a high odds chance of defeating, who is in the top 10, it would have to be Kevin Lee and RDA. RDA in his fight against Paul Felder, oh my goodness. RDA had an awesome performance against Paul Felder. He really did. It's right now whether or not RDA can be consistent, because that's a problem with Rafael dos Anjos, where at one moment you're like, oh my goodness, this guy has all the tools to become a world champion yet again. And then there are some moments where like, what's going on with Rafael dos Anjos? He looks very passive, he's not really doing much here, and this guy is being easily taken advantage of. Like, what's going on with RDA here? And that's the problem with Rafael dos Anjos, that he's very inconsistent, and if you're to flip a coin, looking at RDA's career, on what version of him we're going to see if you're divided against Michael Chandler, it's very likely we're going to see the very passive, inconsistent side of RDA fight against Chandler here. Yes, he had a strong performance against Paul Felder, but until I can see him be consistent through this and get a string of victories, I'm wary about him in putting him in the top 5. We also have Kevin Lee here. So Kevin Lee lost in a very good battle against Charles Oliveira. This isn't a discredit to Kevin Lee. He had a really good showcase fight against somebody as good as Oliveira. Oliveira's just that much more better than Lee. And Lee, he's coming back after, this would be a 2-year hiatus, right? He'd be coming back after 2 years taking a break. Kevin Lee, last time we saw him in a recent interview, he said he doesn't really care that much about fighting, and he wants to go take a break from it. Kind of like Tyron Woodley, but now Kevin Lee, he got himself a brand new tattoo. He's trying to make a comeback again in the UFC. He's still a top 10 ranked fighter. Let's pit him against somebody like Michael Chandler. I think those two are very similar in terms of like their striking and wrestling ability. In terms of just the eye test, are very similar. But I believe while Kevin Lee is a better wrestler, I think Michael Chandler is just slightly above him in terms of being a complete mixed martial artist. So in terms of stylistic matchups here, I think the perfect matchup would be Kevin Lee, Rafael dos Anjos, maybe Paul Felder. We're not sure about him. He's like sort of retired, but not retired also. But that's if he loses to Dan Hooker. If he does defeat Dan Hooker, then he should fight against Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson, there's no way Tony Ferguson can fight against Oliveira, Gaethje, Poirier, Nurmagomedov. So Ferguson, he's stuck in this like weird position where he's a top 5 fighter, and he's stuck being at the number 5th ranked until everyone else in front of him either loses or he has a stellar performance against Chandler. So Ferguson, he's right now kind of stuck. Also, let's not forget, Tony Ferguson and Michael Chandler, they were kind of beefing. They were kind of beefing on Twitter and on social media. Tony Ferguson like doing promos saying like, I don't want to fight against Michael Chandler because he's beneath me. Chandler saying that Tony Ferguson is beneath him. So what's going on here? It would be very upsetting if we see Charles Oliveira fight against Chandler if Hooker were to lose. I think Charles Oliveira is definitely one of those fighters who is worthy of a championship fight. It's just a matter of time of when he gets it. And also, it'll be a situation if the UFC really wants to put somebody like Charles Oliveira in the front of the line. And so, Jason Knight is set to make his MMA return. This coming in from Michael Lynch from MMAsecond.com. Jason Knight was released from the UFC back in November 2018 following his 4th straight loss with the company. After his loss, he decided to put his MMA career on hold to pursue a career in bare knuckle boxing. It was just announced yesterday that he will finally be making his MMA return. Now, his BKFC career, though, Knight fought twice in BKFC in 2019. His first fight was a decision loss to Artem Lobov. The fight was so good, the promotion immediately booked for a rematch for later that year. Knight won the rematch by corner stoppage early in the 5th round. Both fights were considered some of the best fights in BKFC history. I remember those fights, actually. Those are proper wars. Way better than Artem Lobov's fight against, who's that one, is it Michael Chandler? Oh, yeah. So Artem Lobov, he fought against somebody in boxing. It was that guy who had a knockdown, who got knocked down by Conor McGregor during sparring camp or during training camp. And then like he kind of, I forgot his name. Gosh darn it. Who is the guy? Wait a minute. Give me a second. Paulie Maglione. That's it. So Conor McGregor fought against a guy named Paulie Maglione, or Magliana, and so Paulie got knocked down during training camp, and then Conor McGregor posted it on Twitter, and for some reason, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, Paulie got really upset by this. he's like, hey bro, what the heck? And I'm thinking here, dude, Paulie, you're his training partner. Why are you upset about him getting a knockdown on you during training camp? What, are you afraid it's hurting your brand? Dude, he's a retired fighter. That's the thing. Paulie is a retired fighter. And he had a great career being a cruiserweight champion. And so, I don't get why he's like so upset and he's doing all these interviews. And he's like on Instagram and on Twitter calling people out and then making like looking dumb in front of both the boxing community and the MMA community being like even till now. He's still salty about it. Like type up Paulie Magliani or like Paulie Connor and you'll see Paulie's name here. Type it down, Google search him, and he continues to complain about it. I was like, I can't believe you posted a picture of me being punched by you. How could you? I'm just like, oh my gosh. I don't get what's up with this guy's pride here. But Artem Lobov fought against Paulie, and Artem Lobov beat him, which I think is even a bigger embarrassment than you going off on a tirade, being super salty and upset that Conor McGregor had a knockdown on you during training camp. So Artem Lobov, he then fought against Jason Knight here, not Travis, Jason Knight. And I remember watching that fight, and I was like, oh my goodness, this fight is so fun. It's if only more BKFC fights were like this, but it ain't. And Jason Knight was one of those fighters who, Knight was one of those guys, you put him in the Thiago Alves category, of, and even at one point Diego Sanchez, where you see him, and you know watching Jason Knight, you're going to see a very fun fight, but you're not going to see a good fight, nor are you going to see a fight where he is going to win. Because Jason Knight, he's got a ceiling, like him and Hannah Cyphers. Like, I love watching every Hannah Cyphers fight. I do. They're short, they're easy, they're digestible, they're not long. I can watch all Hannah Cyphers fights and be like, yep, I am happy with what I saw. And that's how it is with Jason Knight, where you see him fight and you're like, yep, that fight was certainly, it was dirty. It was a fight that was very ugly to watch. But you know what? It was fun. So, Jason Knight, he had a really good run against Artem Lobov. Honestly, he's one of those fighters who, contrary to the record, is one of those fighters that you want to see in a UFC card. But Jason Knight, he'll be returning to MMA at Icon 5 on March 5th, 2021. Knight's opponent will be 7-3 Christopher Ramirez. Knight returns to MMA after being away from the sport for 2.5 years. It is assumed that his fight will be the card's main event. Main event Jason Knight, good on you. But the company has not yet announced where the fight will fall on the card. So, Jason Knight making his big MMA return, good on for that. So let's hope Jason Knight's MMA career comeback for 2021 is going to end up well. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Come back after a short break, continuing on with the news brief here. See you soon.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And we are back. And so this is coming in from MMAJunkie.com, with the headline being Umar Nurmagomedov versus Sergey Morozov moved to UFC on ESPN 20 on January 20. This is coming from Farah Hanoum. The rescheduled bantamweight matchup between Umar Nurmagomedov and Sergey Morozov will take place 3 days earlier than initially expected. Originally booked for a UFC 287 card on January 23, the Octagon newcomers will now square off at UFC on ESPN 20 on January 20, which takes place on Fight Island in Abu Dhabi. A person with knowledge of the matchup recently informed MMA Junkie of the change, but asked to remain anonymous since the promotion has yet to make an official announcement. Reporter Igor Lazarin was the first to report the news. Nurmagomedov, 12-0, 0-0 in the UFC, has seen three UFC bookings fall apart through his promotional debut. He was scheduled to make his first Octagon appearance against Hunter Azure back at UFC 249 this past April, but the event was postponed due to restrictions around the COVID-19 pandemic. He was then set to face against Daniel Wood at this past July's UFC on ESPN 14. Both withdrew due to the death of his uncle and coach, who, by the way, is indeed Khabib's father. His latest attempt to make his promotional debut also fell through when he was forced to withdraw just 1 week out from his matchup against Morozov at October's UFC 254 event due to a staph infection. Winner his past 5 fights in a row, Morozov, who's 16-3 in MMA, 0-0 in the UFC, also making his UFC debut, hasn't competed since October 2019 when he defended his M1 Global Bantamweight title with a unanimous decision over Josh Reddinghouse. With a change, the updated lineup for UFC and ESPN 20 includes Michael Chiesa versus Neil Magny, Warley Alves versus Marina Lazez, Vinicius Moreira against Ike Villanueva, Viviane Araújo versus Roxanne Modafferi, and Lerone Murphy versus Douglas Silva de Andrade. Speaking of Michael Chiesa, it is also coming in from MMA Junkie. Michael Chiesa loves being an analyst, but his end goal is commentary for the UFC. So Michael Chiesa is looking to take care of his career behind the desk to the next level. Michael Chiesa is 17-4 in his MMA career, 10-4 in the UFC. A UFC welterweight contender and fight analyst, spent a few weeks on Fight Island in October previewing and recapping UFC events for ESPN. He's become a familiar face on the analyst table, but Chiesa aspirations don't stop there. He hopes to follow the footsteps of fellow fighters and eventually transition into a live fight commentator. He says, and I quote, "I want to be a Daniel Cormier, a Dominic Cruz, a Paul Felder. I love being an analyst, but the end goal is commentary," Chiesa told MMA Junkie. "I put everything into the sport in my life. I'm all in. This is all I've done in the past 13 years, so I'm very passionate about it. And I know that the people that have hired me to do the analyst job, they see the passion is there and they know I'm eager to get to that point. But their exact words, you've got to learn how to walk before you can learn how to run. So I'm still learning how to be the best analyst I possibly can be, but the meat and potatoes of my career is fighting, and I'm excited to get back to the thing that I love doing most. I love competition, and I love fighting. I love training camp, I love everything that comes with this process, and I feel like I got further into a new foray in my career and established myself as someone who can take a break from that at the right time to get back to do what's most important, and that's competition." Michael Chiesa goes on to continue to say, "The most important goal for me is becoming world champion. The other stuff is more endgame, but I want it all right now. But it's most important for me to focus on Neil Magny, and that's what I've done for the past 3 months, is to focus on Neil Magny. So I'm just excited for the opportunity to compete in the main event, and I'm going to seize the opportunity, and then I'll get back to the desk work when I get done." Alright, so he'll be fighting against Neil Magny in January 20. Now, I'll say this right now, as somebody who has been a Neil Magny fan for years, Neil Magny is one of those fighters who I think who kind of is in a similar vein as Uriah Hall, except better, in the sense of there are a lot of expectations for Neil Magny coming into the UFC. I still remember him back in 2013. I was super hyped about him. I was like, dude, this guy, man, this dude is a future world champion. If he puts it all together, man, this guy is going to be great. That was 7 years ago. Now it's 2021. So, actually, no, that was 8 years ago, going into 2021 now. And when you look back at Neil Magny's career here, he's been doing great. Like, he's only lost 4 times in his UFC career in the span of the last 8 years. He's won, I'm checking here, since his UFC debut, he's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's lost 6 times since making his UFC debut. But he's won 16 times. So he is 16-6 in his UFC career. And when you look at the competition he's able to fight, he's fought against Eric Silva, he's defeated Calvin Gastelum, he's defeated Hector Lombard, he's defeated Carlos Condit, he's defeated Robbie Lawler. In terms of name value here, he's definitely beaten the best. But he's also lost to Damian Maia, he's lost to Lorenzen Markin, to Rafael dos Anjos. So, Neil Magny is, the way how I describe Neil Magny is that fighter that if he is meant to compete against the elites of the elite in his own respective division, he wouldn't do well, but he's definitely a great fighter who can take on anybody who is ranked 5 through 10. That's Neil Magny in a nutshell here. He is good enough, kind of like Charles Oliveira, a journeyman who's good enough to compete with the very best, but not good enough to win for the title. But I believe 2021 will be his year. Michael Chiesa and Neil Magny are both fighters who are at the cusp of competing for a title. They need, I say, 2 more wins. If they get 2 victories in a row, then both Chiesa and Neil Magny would be in line to compete for a title. But they're in the way of each other. So in my prediction here between Neil Magny and Michael Chiesa, I gotta lean towards the direction of Neil Magny. in the sense that if you look at his performance, specifically against Anthony Rocco Martin, Neil Magny, not only is he in the best shape of his entire life, actually, this dude's striking accuracy and ability to go find shots is at the very best it could ever be, and his clinch game is stellar and amazing. So, because of that, and Michael Chiesa is also really good in clinch right now, but I don't think he's ever fought somebody as lengthy or as big of a size of fighter as Neil Magny. So, and he's never fought anybody who is of similar stature as Neil Magny. Compared to Magny, who's fought against people who's very similar to Chiesa. So, off the basis of that, and also the fact that Neil Magny in his past 3 performances have been absolutely stellar, I gotta go towards Neil Magny. And even I remember when he fought against Li Zhang, there were people doubting him because there was a year and a half brief instance to which Neil Magny was taking a break from mixed martial arts. He lost to Santiago Ponzinibbio. He lost to him via KO, and then he took a year and a half break, then came back, fought against Li Zhang, looked like the very best he's ever been. So this late in Neil Magny's career, I'm talking about Neil Magny as if he's a journeyman who's late in his career. He's only 33 years old. He came to the UFC very young, steamrolling people at a super young age, that once he got to that point where he couldn't fight against the absolute best, he slowed down. But now he's making this the second wind in his career right now. I believe we are seeing the best version of Neil Magny, and if Neil Magny could put it all together, he could be a future welterweight champion. He could be the welterweight champion that I always believed he could be. So the next story here is coming in from the New Indian Express. Indian MMA fighter Mohammed Mahbub Khan seeks government help to pursue his unique journey. Mohammed Mahbub Khan was a 22-year-old taxi driver and had earlier worked in a clothing store to meet his basic needs. And so, Mohammed Mahbub Khan, who became the first and only Indian to bag an international gold medal in MMA, has sought help from the central government so that he can earn more laurels for the country. So Khan was a 22-year-old taxi driver, had earlier worked in a clothing store. The MMA fighter, who aspires to win more medals for his country, wants the support of the government in his journey. He says, I was a taxi driver earlier, I was a part-time worker in a clothing store to fulfill my basic needs of my family. My interest in MMA began when I first saw my friend training, and later, with the help of my trainer, Sakma Khalid, I have come this far, Mahbub Khan told ANI. It has been only 4 years training, during which, at the age of 20 years old, I bagged international gold medal, representing India in 2018 IMMAF, International Mixed Martial Arts Federation, defeated Bahrain, Kazakhstan, and Australia. He further said, I am the first and only Indian who has bagged an international gold medal for the country in MMA till now. I request the government of India to support me to participate in more international fights and wins for the country. Indian MMA coach, team coach, Mahbub Khan's trainer, Sheikh Khalid, he praised on the world champion and said that they have supported the unique journey of the fighter. Khan is the only talent who won gold medal for India at an international platform. He had an incredibly unique journey. He was a taxi driver, now he's a world champion. We have supported and sponsored him during this journey. Today, MMA is the world's fastest growing sport, he added. So there's a lot of expectations coming in. He's only 24 years old, and so, he was only 24 years old. He was training for 4 years, and in that first 2-year span, he was working part-time, which makes sense. So he's still a young lad, and he's got a bright future ahead of himself, and I expect good things coming in from Khan. And so Amanda Ribas, who's coming in from Essentially Sports, says that she's planning to go and steal the thunder from Conor McGregor vs. Dustin Poirier 2. Being written in by Rish Bob Singh, with the presence of Conor McGregor vs. Dustin Poirier headliner, people may forget about the UFC 257 in its entirety for its cards. In one fighter here who is standing out, one fight here that's going to go stand out for me, as a fight fan, would be Marina Rodriguez versus Amanda Ribas. Despite being the opener of the main card, Ribas looking for Mig to change several heads of their performance. While talking to Deschmo, the Brazilian clarified that she hasn't returned to Fight Island to be on the backseat. She knows that most of the fans will tune in to watch Conor McGregor return to the octagon after an absence of 1 year. However, she wants people to watch her fight as well. She goes on to say, I train so hard because, I want to fight on the Conor McGregor Dustin Poirier card. Everybody was trying to watch this fight, and I don't want to do that. I want everybody to watch my fight. So I train hard. When I start my fight, everybody, wow, it's on fire, steal the show. That's what Ribas said. So, Amanda Ribas, she's coming off a very dominant performance, defeating Paige Van Zandt and will not fight against Marina Rodriguez. And I'll tell you this right now, Amanda Ribas versus Marina Rodriguez, there's no doubt hyperbole, could potentially be the best fight of the entire night. And I predict, this is my prediction. I say Marina Rodriguez will defeat Amanda Ribas after 3 rounds of action, after 3 rounds of very close action. And I could say here, I will not be surprised if Amanda Ribas versus Marina Rodriguez ends up being a better fight than Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier here. Both these fighters stylistically match up with each other perfectly. They have both great kickboxing pedigrees. Both fighters are also very underrated grapplers, and even they're one of those fighters where there's no way you can expect this fight to ever be boring. These two fighters in Rodriguez and Amanda Ribas, whenever you see those two fights in their respective bouts, you're thinking, oh my goodness, this girl here, she's going 100%. She's not being passive, she's being ultra aggressive. This is a fun, barn burner fight here. Do I think it's going to end by knockouts? No, I don't really think so. I think both fighters here are incredibly durable. In Rodriguez's fight against Carla Esparza, she was being rocked from the ground and pound action, from the very high volume of ground and pounding coming in from Carla Esparza, and then Esparza constantly switching and trying to go tap out Marina Rodriguez, trying to go get the highlight reel finish. No, Marina Rodriguez is one of the toughest women out there in all the UFC, and these are two women who are top prospects who I believe are good enough to be part of the top 10. Now, neither of them are currently part of the top 10 in the women's strike rankings here, but I absolutely wouldn't be surprised if both these women, who even after this fight are going to walk away being better with their stock being risen, I expect these two to meet each other in the center of the octagon, throwing out high kicks, throwing out bombs, flying forearms, and just a high volume of strikes. I'll make a prediction right now. Amanda Ribas versus Marina Rodriguez is going to be the fight that will have the highest volume of strikes, the highest volume of action, the highest volume of leg kicks. Ribas and Rodriguez can steal the show. But once again, I'm not gonna lie here. People are gonna watch the show specifically for McGregor versus Poirier, but hopefully Ribas and Rodriguez, after this fight, their stock can rise, and it'll help them down the line as they go and try to get booked for further fights. And so that will wrap it up for today's podcast. Once again, there will be Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar. We're going back to Fight Island on January 16. I'm going to be watching it. Hopefully, you guys are going to watch it. Expect to see a great performance and a great main event coming in from both fighters, from Holloway and from Calvin Kattar at Fight Island. So, all I got to say is thank you. Thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.